My name is Dr. Melody Moore, and I live in Venice Beach, California. I became a clinical psychologist at the same time I began to practice yoga. And so the integration of psychology and the practice of yoga, for me, they travel alongside each other, hand in hand. I went to graduate school in Dallas, Texas, at the University of Southwestern Medical School. So I was fortunate enough to study psychology inside of a medical program, which gave it a really interesting slant, especially when considering the integration of psyche and soma. And my yoga practice began in 2001. My mom took my family, which consisted of she and my dad and my older sister, to Costa Rica on a yoga retreat. And none of us had ever practiced yoga before. But the teacher there, her name is Shruti Colbert, she was so wonderful. And I so enjoyed the practice with her that I actually invited her to come to Texas, where I was living at the time, to come to Dallas and live with me, as she was offered a job there to create a series for a studio. And so I had an in-home yoga teacher for the first 3 months of my practice, and she taught me not only asana, but also meditation, some chants, pranayama, and I fell in love with the practice. And it was during the time that I was also in graduate school studying psychology, and so these two paths, again, they've always gone hand in hand for me, and I've been able to use both practices personally as a way of understanding myself and as a way to find healing for myself. And in being able to use and utilize both of the practices of psychology, being a client, and of yoga, being a longtime student, I've been practicing now for 15 years, I've been able to integrate within the past 5 years the two practices in order to give them back as a yoga teacher. I was inspired to create Embody Love Movement by my own struggle with body image from the time I was a very young child. I remember being 8 years old and at a sleepover party with a friend whose mom informed us that we would be having fettuccine Alfredo for dinner, and freaking out because that was not something that I would allow myself to eat, and I was 8. In my mind, that kind of food would make me a certain way that I didn't want to be. And it was really heartbreaking to grow up with that kind of self-awareness and self-beat about my body shape. I really put my own self-value in how I looked externally, and I imagined that my family valued me because of how I looked externally as well, which wasn't the truth, but it was my truth. As a clinical psychologist, I have my dharma, I know, my calling has been working with clients who also similarly struggle with negative body image and with eating disorders. And I've been able to be the therapist for an incredible group of girls who at the time I had in a group therapy situation once weekly. On Wednesday nights, every single Wednesday night, the 6 of them would show up, and they ranged in age from 8th grade through 11th grade, and they were in a therapy group together weekly for 5 years. At the end of that 5 years, I knew these girls have particular gifts. They have all of these resources and tools that they've developed over time, and they have a capacity to give back from what they've been given through having had this opportunity to be with one another. And so I developed Embody Love Movement actually for those specific girls. That was at least my consciousness at the time. I created a workshop called the Embody Love Workshop now. They renamed it the Inner Beauty Shop when it's delivered to girls in junior high and high schools. And I delivered this curriculum to that group of my clients. And organically, they became empowered and asked me to teach them how to deliver the curriculum to girls who were younger than they were. They actually said, "You're getting really old. And when you were our therapist, when we first met you, we thought you were cool and young and hip, and now you're getting old, and we feel like it's our turn." And I was like, yes! We feel like it's our turn to step forward and to be able to give back and pay it forward, which was my heart's hope. And so I trained that group of girls how to deliver the Inner Beauty Shop, and they took it into junior highs and into camps and into churches and back to their college campuses. And from there, it just spread. There just is such a need, sadly, for all girls and women really to be reminded of their inner beauty and of their self-worth. And so Embodied love movement has become something that spread quickly and that scaled broadly because I think it speaks directly to the hearts of so many of us who have known or know the struggle of not feeling like we're enough unless we look a certain way externally. And the whole mission of Embodied Love Movement is to get that negativity out of the way so that we can step fully into our purpose and create change in the world that's meaningful. So what gets in the way of self-love and self-compassion? We do. Our illusion that we're somehow separate from the rest, separate from the others, separate from ourselves, or separate from God. I think that's the root of most of the illusion that creates fear that we're not enough. And we tend to get in our own way by tripping over our ego in that way. The ego is the part of us that feels like we're separate from the one, the oneness. And not to get like too airy-fairy, this is actually like really grounded. If we want to concretize it, like for me, filming the series of yoga videos was the first time I did something like that. And what came up for me was anxiety and fear. I'm not ready, I'm not enough, I don't have enough to deliver, I don't have enough to offer, I'm not an expert, so many other people could do it better than me, why me? That freak out and that spin we put ourselves in, if we listen to that voice, then we get in our way, because that's the ego, that's coming from ego, the sense of ourselves that's separate, that doesn't recognize there's something much bigger at play here. We're really here as an offering. Our entire life is actually an offering back. Our life is a prayer, and that prayer is to be part of the flow. It's to be integrated into a bigger design than we're aware of. And so when we see ourselves as separate, when we see ourselves as not enough, or the flip of that, when we see ourselves as too much, when we think that we're better than everybody else, that we have something to offer that nobody else possibly could, when we feel like the rest are somehow less valuable than we are, that's high ego, that's narcissism, but it's the same thing. It's the shadow side of low ego, of not enoughness, of shame. When we can get out of our way, it's when we're aligning with the flow of the universe. It's when we're in acceptance that God is not only around us, but within us, that truth and love exist for us, and that as part of that, we're then simply a vessel for the bigger wisdom, for the truth that surrounds us, and for the love that's within us. Then we're out of our way. Then we're actually on purpose. Then we're moving into the direction that is healing for ourselves and for the world around us as well. And that's true both on and off the yoga mat. So the question is, how has being raised as a Christian in Dallas, Texas, which is part of the Bible Belt, informed my path as someone who believes in the power of prayer and believes in the power of intention? And the answer is, I have no idea. I mean, I think both things. I think in one sense for me, my journey was that I had to go as far away from that understanding of what God is. I grew up with an understanding and a belief and really a faith that God was male, all-powerful, punitive. And so I grew up afraid of this being that I thought I had to perform for and be perfect in the eyes of. This being was certainly separate from how I understood myself as being. I had to reject really all of that because I felt so rejected by the religion because of who I am and what I believe in, that I threw away religion entirely. In fact, the first time I was in a yoga class and somebody said the word God, and it was my friend and teacher, Sean Korn, my whole body was like, no, what's happening? This feels like woo-woo and religious, and I wholeheartedly rejected it. I was very uncomfortable with it, which is now why when I use the word God, I try to give some context about like what this word means for you and to you at this time, recognizing that our relationship to our understanding of God can shift. Mine certainly has. And I feel like I've almost come full circle now, where for me, I love Sean's definition of God, which is the truth and love that exists within. And when I am in consideration of God that way, it's so different than my feeling of this higher, separate, all-knowing, punitive being that some people are good enough for the love of and others are not. It's instead an understanding for me of there's a greater wisdom. There is a benevolent universe that's conspiring in the favor of all of us all of the time. And that in understanding it that way, I can be part of something, not separate from it, but part of it. And so for me now, I see God in every moment. I see God in everything. I see God in everyone, and that has to be inclusive of me, because how could I be the only thing separate from that God? So for me, God's in every molecule and every cell of every living being. And there isn't a separation between God and I. And so for me to call upon God, to invoke, to set an intention is simply answering what's already truthful, really. It's not like begging a question. It's being in alignment with the truth that's already available. Like God already is, the truth already is. It's my saying, I'm in alignment with that, I'm in agreement with that. Actually, I hear often from people in Dallas, wow, this really great thing happened. It was totally a God moment. It was a God thing that I got this parking space or met this person or found this job or whatever it might be. And I think it's funny. It's all a God moment. There are not isolated incidents that happen to be God moments where God's in that moment. It's all a God moment. And for me, part of my understanding of God now, which is very different than how it was growing up, is that when we can include, when we can integrate the moments that are dark, the moments that break our heart, the moments that cause us to feel enraged or have a sense of the injustices that happen in the world, when we include those as God moments, all moments, light and dark, as God moments, they're all holy, then we really have access to how big this thing outside of us, this wisdom, this love outside of us is. And not how small we are, because we're not separate from that greatness. We're a part of it, we're an aspect of it, and a reflection of it as well. So my journey has really shifted over time, and I won't say come full circle, just transformed as I keep asking, and I will continue to ask, because I know this relationship will continue to shift for me for more clarity and more perspective of my understanding and my capacity to invoke what I understand as truth and love of God. The meaning of collaboration and of friendship and of having a community, having a kula, in my life has been so valuable. It might be the thing I'm the most grateful for and appreciative for. I've been really blessed with wonderful friends and mentorship and people willing to collaborate with me in a number of projects and in a number of capacities. And I know at the beginning of my career, especially as a clinical psychologist in private practice, I felt so isolated. I was giving and giving and giving, and being single at the time especially, going home to nothing and no one, and really not having anyone there to hold space for me. And I recognized, I'll say too late, that was not a sustainable practice. And so I really sought out friendship, meaningful connection and community. Our minds are wired to be in connection with each other, biologically, physiologically, spiritually, I'll say spiritually wired, emotionally wired to be in connection with each other. We have a limbic system that's meant to be reflective of one another. And so to me, the value of friendship is, it's almost ineffable. I can't even put into words how much it means to me. And also mentorship. I am so grateful to have true mentors in my life, people who hold my hand and have their hand on my back and are pushing me forward and also giving me honest and fierce reflective feedback when I need it in a way that's gracious and compassionate so that I can hear it. Having a kula, having a tribe, having a collective around me makes me feel empowered and able to do the work that I feel meant to do in the world, but know that it wouldn't be sustainable to do it alone and to do it without holding the hands of those who are willing to walk in that fire with me. There are so many friends, mentors, and teachers that I could thank. So I will thank the ones that are showing up in my heart in this moment. The first being Sean Korn, my love, the love probably of my life, my dear friend, saw me. She saw something in me that I couldn't see. Maybe 6 or 7 years ago, actually asked me to come and leave my private practice, and we have a really funny story about it, be part of Off the Mat in a way that I would stuff envelopes all day long, and she was kidding. But I took her seriously, thought about it, prayed about it, and called her and said, "Hi, it's Melody from Dallas. I don't know if you remember this, but you offered me a job, and I'm going to say yes to it because I feel a yes in my heart." And she was like, "Are you joking? No, one day you're going to be my boss. What's your path? What's your purpose? And let me help you inhabit what's true for you," which was such a great thing, and she meant it. She, for the past 6 years, has been side by side with me, making sure that I feel enough self-love and enough self-compassion to continue to do this work. Also, my teacher in Dallas, Janie Montague, taught me thousands, literally thousands of hours of asana practice and joined me in a collaborative effort in treatment of girls and women with negative body image and disordered eating. And that relationship continues to be so meaningful. I carry her in my heart everywhere I go. My teacher trainers, David Sunshine and Jessica O'Keefe at Dallas Yoga Center, I'm so thankful for their wisdom and for their guidance. And my coach, my mentor, my friend, Carrie Kelly. Carrie Kelly is someone who has stood for me and with me and beside me and taught me so much in the way that she is and in the way that she shows up for me again and again and again. So I have so much gratitude for so many other people, but those are the handful few who I know without whom I could never be who I am or believe in who I am. And now I feel like it's really necessary to thank my parents, both of them. I found a card from my dad, who's passed away 3 years ago almost, a couple weeks ago, and his salutation said, "There is no other you, be yourself." And I was like, that's where I got it. It's from my dad. And I have a mom who, throughout my entire life, told me to be, believe, and behold, and to always encourage me and found ways to positively reinforce anything that I did that she wanted to see more of. And I know for sure that part of the reason I have confidence in myself is because of the way in which both of my parents congratulated me just for showing up authentically. So I'm so grateful for the two of them as teachers and as models in my life. I know my practice is working if off the mat, my life is working, meaning my life is working for me and with me. Are my relationships at a place that are peaceful? Is the work that I'm doing in the world, my purposeful work or my career, is it working in a way that feels sustainable? Do I feel purposeful? Is the way that I'm treating and talking to myself, not only on the mat, but off the mat, is it kind? Is it compassionate? Do I feel at peace? And if those things are true, then I know that the practices I'm doing on the mat and on the cushion are working for me, because the life that I'm living outside of the practice is one that's kind, that's compassionate, that feels truthful, that feels in alignment, and that feels in integrity. My advice for somebody struggling with an eating disorder is don't go this alone. An eating disorder is severe, and it's harmful, and its purpose is actually to kill you. And I'm going to speak the fierce truth to that, because if you're good enough at your eating disorder, you're going to die. There is no such thing as perfect. Perfect is dead. And so if you know, if there's something in your heart that's telling you, I know this is up for me, I know the struggle is bigger than I am, seek help. If it's bigger than you, there's no way to do it by yourself. And there are trained therapists who are experts at helping with disordered eating who are available to you. My recommendation would be to look up NEDA, the National Eating Disorder Association. Call them. A live person will answer the phone and give you a reference or a referral to someone who in your community can be there to help walk you through and help you regain access to your life. You're worth it. You're worth making that phone call and seeking that help. If you're struggling with negative body image, that probably means you exist because most of us are struggling with negative body image. So I hope that you'll watch the videos that I made about finding acceptance for your body. I hope that you'll let yourself sit for 20 minutes and go through the body scan and maybe begin to open up access to a different kind of dialogue with your body. It's a long journey, but it's definitely one worth taking, because finding acceptance for who you are outside comes from the recognition of your value inside. And it matters. You matter. It's important that you let yourself engage in that dialogue and engage along that path so that you can become aware of what you have to offer to the world. It's not how beautiful you are or how thin you are. It's your heart. It's who you are. And without you accessing that, the world misses out, and we're missing you. So please seek out your own transformation in that way. And if you're a yoga teacher and you're holding space for your students who you think might be struggling with negative body image or you fear could be struggling with an eating disorder, my first beckoning to you is to self-check, to self-regulate, to look first at your own relationship to your body and make sure that you're getting into at least the journey of finding acceptance for your body so that you're becoming part of a solution for somebody else. And if you feel like you want to have a conversation, you might have a responsibility, especially to someone who's struggling with an eating disorder, to have a hard conversation and to be willing to get into the dialogue with them where you can ask them about self-care in general. Instead of putting somebody on the defense and pointing a finger and you have an eating disorder, maybe ask them how they're doing, how they're feeling, how's their self-care, how's their sleep, how are they nourishing themselves, what kind of movement are they engaging in, and get into a bigger conversation where that they can feel your care for them and your concern for them, and then perhaps offering observations that you see behaviorally of what's happening from your perspective without blame, so that you don't create any more shame for somebody already in a struggle that may just be waiting for somebody to notice and to care and to offer support. You could be that person for one of your students if you're willing.